Hello, and welcome to Earth Science again. Okay, so in this subunit, we are going to talk about factors affecting biological diversity. So, let me get this PowerPoint started. So there are many different things that affect biological diversity, but one of the main things that we want to talk about is this idea of selection. So there are four types of selection, but the three main types that I'm going to talk about with you are stabilizing, directional, and diversifying selection. So there's diversifying there at the bottom. So with stabilizing selection, the example they have here are robins and laying 4 eggs in their clutch rather than 5 or 3. That's because if you have larger clutches, you're going to have a result with malnourished chicks once they hatch, and smaller clutches may result in no viable offspring. So they kind of cover their bases, so to speak, by after millions of years, they figured out evolutionarily that 4 is generally the perfect number for them. So sometimes you'll have outliers with 6 and outliers with 3, but for the most part, they generally follow this trend here for 4. Another good example would be an area with many small plants and many tall plants. Tall plants may be accustomed to being hit by weathering forces such as wind, water, and the smaller plants may not be able to reach as high as the tall plants. So while the tall plants may be getting destroyed by all these weathering factors, and the short plants may be getting destroyed because they don't have enough energy getting into the system, we find this perfect balance right in the middle of medium-sized plants that are able to withstand the weathering forces and are able to also be tall enough to be able to be competitive for energy restrictions such as sun and water and air. So then we go to directional selection, and this is essentially what's happening is one trait is being selected for due to any number of things, but normally it's an environmental thing. So the example here is peppered moths, and I'll get into it a little later on in this subunit, but essentially what happened with peppered moths was the original population was peppered. It was white with little black flakes on it. And what happened was the Industrial Revolution happened in London, England, and many of the forests there sequestered so much carbon due to a large output of carbon that they turned black. So what happened was these white moths were able to be seen a lot more easily by predators on these black trees, so they were picked off. And after natural selection and fitness, remember that that's a key term with natural selection, the black moths were more fit in this environment, this smoggy environment, because they were able to hide on these black trees. So many predators couldn't see them. So that's directional selection, is a change in the environment or other things, normally environment, pushing one set of traits to be more dominant than the original set of traits. And then the last one is diversifying selection, and this selection is pretty crazy. It's essentially just two extremes are the selected adaptations. So this example is mountain hares or Himalayan rabbits, and the idea is that there's a rocky environment, and the original population is of white. So these black rocks are able to support more dark Himalayan rabbits, and then there are also gray. There are also gray rabbits. So these gray rabbits are able to hide in the rocks, but also be able to kind of stay away from predators because of the snow in the Himalayas. So you're going to see these gray ones kind of in rocky outcroppings, but also able to move around a little bit, whereas these black ones kind of just hang out in the rocky outcroppings. These white ones don't get selected for as much because they kind of stick out like a sore thumb. They can't really sit in the or the dark rocky outcroppings, and they can't really sit in the area where there is snow but also rock. So that's what's happening with diversifying selection. It's selecting for two extremes rather than the original population. So that's pretty important to know. Okay, so here is just, we got a couple examples of adaptation. Here's a walking stick bug, and it looks like a stick, and that's an adaptation that was selected for over thousands of years and many generations because it looks like a stick. So it's able to kind of hide away from these certain predators that are going to be in the trees looking for bugs to eat. And then another quick example for adaptations and natural selection is birds. So mostly peacocks, well not mostly, but a very good example is peacocks. So fun fact, peacocks are their own like set of species. So the males are called peacocks and the females are called peahens. So that's important to know when you're at the zoo and you see a bunch of peacocks. But essentially what's happening here is the males with more feathers and more color are showing that they have more energy and are in a situation in their life to be able to support not only offspring but also other peahens. So when you see birds that are brightly colored, it takes more energy to produce these bright colors, but with those bright colors, it shows that you are living in a way that you're able to control your energy and maximize your efficiency as an organism. So that's what's attractive about these peacocks to the peahens is the width of the feathers and the color of the feathers. It shows that they have a lot more energy, so they are probably living pretty well. So that's a good thing to think about with adaptations and natural selection. If you want, here is a wonderful link that can tell you all sorts of stuff about adaptations, sexual selection, all those selective processes. And you all should click on this link and read that web page so that you can know a little more about this stuff for the quiz and for the post-test, because what I'm covering is kind of just a simple run-through of these different processes. So you're going to be able to get by just by looking at this PowerPoint, but this link here is going to give you all the information you need. It's a really good link. Okay, so back to the peppered moths. We talked about it. So this is the original peppered moth, and they quickly died out after the Industrial Revolution, and these black moths started coming into the play, and that's directional selection. So what happened was this was the original set of genes, and then we as humans really screwed everything up by inputting large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere and into the environment. And trees, what they do is they sequester carbon. They basically breathe it in and exhale oxygen. But when they inhale carbon, it builds the tree up. So that's what they use to grow. So what happened was they took that excess carbon and it turned them black because it was really bad carbon. It was carbon emissions, really. And so then these white peppered moths really stuck out and they got picked off very, very easily. So that's just another example of directional selection, but also adaptation. So we're going to talk about speciation a little bit. I think this is the last slide, and it is. And then you'll be able to get on with it. So just a little review of speciation. A species is classified if two organisms in a population can interbreed, and you can only interbreed in a population. So you got to remember that. If it says population, remember, is it interbreeding? If it's not interbreeding, then it's not a population. They are not the same species. So if two organisms in a population can interbreed, and if they create a viable offspring, a living offspring, and that offspring can reproduce, then that is a species. So we'll go back to the horse, donkey, mule situation here, where a horse and a donkey can have an offspring, and it can live, but that mule is infertile, so it is not able to reproduce. So they are not the same species. And speciation, just so that you know for the quiz, it is when a mechanism for evolution occurs and persists throughout a population, and then the new population cannot interbreed with the original population. So then they have become a new species. So remember up here, to be a population, you have to be able to interbreed. You have to be of the same species. So what happens with speciation is something happens like a natural disaster or migration, anything like that, where one part of a population will eventually evolve due to different mechanisms of evolution: natural selection, adaptation, variation, gene flow, mutation, gene shift, those things. If that happens to one part of that population, then it's going to evolve, it's going to change, and it's going to go through the process of speciation, which means it has become its own species. So there's a question on the quiz. I'm not sure if it's on this quiz, it might be on the unit post-test, but it has to do with a group of chimpanzees, and they split up. The original group stays in one place, the outcast group leaves, it goes through a bunch of different changes, it doesn't even matter what the changes are. That outcast group comes back, it's not able to breed with the original group, then therefore it has become a new species. So that's just something to think about, and it's very important when you think about speciation. Okay, so like with all of the other units and subunits, if you have any questions at all, let me know. If you want to know anything more about something, or if you just are concerned about something, go ahead, give me a call, give me a text, hit me up on Schoology, however you want to do it. I am here for you. So this should be it for the unit, and good luck.